On a lighter note, we didn't talk about this in the first episode, but let me ask you now. We got some high-tech stuff here. I mean, come on. Data stored on little tiny keychain sticks? That is next-level stuff right there.
That was hidden in a caliber, right? That was hidden in like a bullet, right?
That's right. That's right. We've got some satellite imagery. Can you believe that? They're able to take images of the Earth, from outer space. And actually, this was kind of cool. The 90-degree camera, where it looks like you're taking a picture one way, but the mirror's taken the other way. There's some kind of cool tech here, but then other parts of the tech were severely outdated.
Also, like the description of the gliders, like that they fly into the monastery, as well as like it's not like super high tech, but the gliders that they use to go across the Swiss-Italian border. We always get our guns. The description of I love that the one dude puts his the guy from Aramco puts his shotgun in a like a what was it, prayer rug? Like that's how he walks around with his shotgun. Yeah. Crazy. So
where does this leave us in terms of the story? We basically wrapped up with the caves in southern France, and now they've got to get across from Milan into Switzerland because they realize that's where the Aga Khan is, right? And he has the chateau.
They realize that Rayburn is a bigger player. And
we didn't even talk Rayburn.
He is this old ally or old friend of Scot from training from his early years in the Secret Service. He was a bad apple, always taking money or, whatever. Wasn't he involved in like another head of state getting like assassinated?
There was an assassination, and Scot was brought in with the Secret Service to do an investigation. It's not only that he found out there was a leak, so someone who was in charge of the security had leaked something, but it was that Scot was the only one with this intuition that Rayburn, while he was not the leak, it was pinned on another lower level guy who leaked the documents that led to the assassination. Scot had this feeling that Rayburn pawned it off on this guy, that this guy might have not been as guilty as we think, and that was actually Rayburn who used this guy as a pawn and basically brushed it off on him, and Rayburn was going to walk Scot free. And Scot was the one who uncovered further evidence implicating Rayburn, kicked it up the chain. Already didn't like Rayburn because he was doing some shady stuff and he was kind of getting into some bad deals, and so Scot was the reason he was pretty much forced out. Even though he couldn't pin the assassination solely on Rayburn, because Rayburn really did a good job covering his tracks, so this other guy took the fall, and Scot never liked that about him.
Yeah, and we know he's somehow involved with Amir Tokai because Hossam Kalachka showed him that picture early on. Of the kidnapping. Everything is sort of coming together here. We culminate with the fact that the Aga Khan is at this monastery in this town in Switzerland, and it's heavily fortified. Again, taking us back to that Lions of Lucerne, type thing. You got to get to the top of this mountain.
Right. And
boom, Scot formulates a plan, and he brings in one of our faves, Claudia Mueller, who is now engaged.
Yes, was it Schroeder? He was one of the operations guys on the tactical team. One of the
commandos, yeah, the leader.
Man, how did you feel?
Who takes a couple rounds, right?
He does, and he shows up at just the right time. Also, kind of a good guy. You can kind of like him. I really like how she's dealt with here, and I really like Scot's reaction when he sees the engagement ring, when he meets the Schroeder guy. They're all very adult about it. You know, no one's really, holding old grudges or anything. They're realizing our lives changed, our lives moved on. Man, when Claudia was name dropped, I actually had mixed feelings. As much as I loved it, I was like, yes, one of my favorite characters. Love this. Let's go. I was like, oh, but in such a bad book at kind of a bad time where I'm really not jiving with the story. Crap. So I love seeing her, but I don't know if I was in the right headspace at the time to get her back. But what did you think? How was that dealt with, in your opinion?
I was excited, but I was also worried that like we had kind of wrapped her up neatly, and I was okay with how she was like phased out. And I didn't want like anything to like ruin it. And then I think it sort of saved itself with that conversation that Scott had and allowed him to like just be a normal human being, like to think about that. Sends him down this path of thinking about what he could have had, why he shouldn't have let her go. He even has to like tell himself like, boom, snap out of it, Scott, like get back into the mission. Like you can't be thinking about, the wedding you should have had with this lady. So I thought those dealt perfectly. And again, she's the best because she's a badass. She's able to culminate this whole team to come together. She marries a nice guy, or is going to marry this nice guy who, has to do that macho, a little bit of macho thing, oh, this is the Scot Harvath that you talk of. Because Scott's, 5'10"? He's a little shorter. This guy was like, he was super tall and like 250 pounds of pure muscle. I thought that was kind of funny, Scott like looking up at this dude. But yeah, no, I thought it was dealt with good and, didn't ruin it for me. So
yeah, that was good stuff.
What did you think of the storming of the monastery?
It was pretty cool. Again, I was thinking Lions of Lucerne. I liked how he and Claudia scaled the mountain in the winter. They got to this church at the top, and it was almost I was reminiscing of that, but it was falling short of it. So it was like, if I want to reminisce of it, I really want the story to rise to that level or supersede it.
Yeah.
So I didn't like that it recalled something that I loved and then maybe ended up just a little flatter. But is this when how do they actually get Rayburn? I'm trying to remember.
So they get Rayburn by like sending Claudia in, right, to entice him with some of the artifacts that she took. And she's supposed to be the daughter of one of the Sherpa, not the guy who owned the inn, but who helped him do the climbing.
Yes.
And she wants the money. And of course, Rayburn's only out for the money, so he obviously is going to take this meeting. They kidnap him, and that's where they strap, explosives to his nether regions to get him to cooperate properly, because they have this plan, right? Again, dumping this historical fiction. They know that, the storming of Mussolini to get to him, and the only reason that was able to succeed is because they had an inside man. So they need that inside man, and Rayburn is going to be that guy.
Yeah, that might have been the best part of the book, because it wasn't just one joke of like, hey, it's like a cheap hotel, no ballroom. When he's saying the explosive underwear, the detonation device is too tight, but it kept up. It wasn't just one joke about having.
It was a couple ball jokes that were pretty funny.
There were 5 or 6. Like, it just kept going. And again, that's a Thorism. Thor Harvath is so funny, and those little quips back and forth. I was just delighting, and every single time it came up, it was like, no, not another one, and they were all clever. So, yeah, the ball jokes here, it's crazy to say it, that underwear bomb detonation strapped to your nuts is my favorite part of this book, but yeah, that's my favorite part of this book.
That's your winner. Okay. All right, so we finally meet the Aga Khan, right, who we think is the Scorpion. But it turns out, again, we have a heel turn, and then immediately after that, we have another heel turn. Wait, he's not orchestrating this whole thing. He's actually, in the beginning, he was interested in it, but not for what eventually is the plan that it got put into action. And then we find out, boom, Hosan Kalachka is actually the one who wants to restore the Ottoman Empire and has been orchestrating this entire thing. We already sort of talked about this. It kind of fell flat for me. It was supposed to be this big thing. And again, I felt like if he was more involved in the story a little bit better, it would have resonated more as this ally turned, ultimate big bad.
Right.
Some of the scenes, getting into the castle, their glider, like going and exploding and doing this roll. I was imagining like that whole scene in my head, like how they get through that. Once Scott like actually gets out of the situation with Hosan, and then like the whole thing starts to go up in flames. Just the description of his interaction fighting Rayburn and how he gets Rayburn, like that was pretty cool, and like the heat and everything. I was like, especially the way that George was narrating it, it was like super fast and super quick. He knows how to like pick up his speed in order to like propel you through the story. Right. So I really like that. Yeah, and then boom, we head off to Saudi Arabia where we culminate this novel.
Yeah, the action was really cool, and you are right. When that glider is kind of tumbling over itself and is about to go off the edge of the cliff, but there's like an upwind, and so the wing that goes over the cliff catches this updraft, which blows it back so it stays on top of the mountain instead of rolling down. And then the fire,
the log, shit right there.
Yeah, and then the log falls out of the fireplace. This whole castle goes up. Yeah, really awesome action writing here. Again, that I think is a Brad Thor specialty. He can really bring the action and get you into it. So I was kind of glad here. At the end, it's really ramping up to a final piece. I'll just say again, it was weird. Ozan's resurrecting the Ottoman Empire. But at the same time, the Aga Khan is explaining, and we're getting another history lesson on the Wahhabis and the Saudi royal family. I'm like, the two don't really have all that much to do with one another. And so I was like, am I supposed to get a history lesson on the Carthaginians and Hannibal? Was I supposed to get a lesson on the beginning of Islamic history and the Sunni Shia split? Now I'm getting a lesson on the Wahhabi revolts in Saudi Arabia and the growth of their extremism. We've already gone through the Ottoman Empire, resurrecting that. They randomly threw in a story about Mussolini because, well, it sounded like it would really inform this plot here. I'm just like, I love the historical nuggets, but even a very well-informed reader, as just you and I, with history and various political things, we're going to get lost with this. Like, I don't know how you walk away from this book being like, oh, I'm more informed about the Wahhabi revolts in Saudi Arabia and Wahhabi extremism and how it's linked to Al-Qaeda, or how I'm informed about Hannibal and Carthage. It's getting way too jumbled for me. It's too complex, doing too much. I've said that already, so let's move on. Final action scene, pretty cool. Eventually, Scot realizes the royal family is basically the target because while it's supposed to be these revolutionaries and they're meant to look like the ones causing the problem, well, what's going to happen all of a sudden when the royal family is forced to... Is it that they're forced to shoot the protesters or someone kills them? What was the deal there with that?
So, like, again, Hosan is, like, stirring up trouble because they're, again, another pillar in this whole thing is to have the fall of Saudi Arabia, which would then allow them to come in and take over and have all this money. And they know that if they tell that the Saudi royal family is rounding up extremists, then that causes all these protests. This causes then a summit to happen between the Wahhabis and the royal family, and like the royal family is not going to do anything, but what they have is an inside man dressed up as a Saudi royal guard or on the team, or who gets, I guess he thinks that, but eventually it's like whoever is going to be in charge of their airplane out of the meeting, and that's supposed to blow up. And Scot has to come in, save the day. You know, there's a couple of different interactions where Scot is, driving around Riyadh. At one point, they find a warehouse that had a bunch of water, and they're getting hints into like, oh, okay, the antidote's in the water, and the actual disease is on the spice. Is in the spice, which is going to be sprinkled on the cash because they have like this list of all these like payday loan services. They piece together that all these businesses have one thing in common, and it's cash. And I thought that was another like interesting thing. We get a tidbit about how like cash is dirty and how like just a little bit of exposure to it, our money is very porous. So
like cocaine.
Yeah, like 4 out of every 5 bills has trace amounts of cocaine, which we actually did that experiment in chemistry class, and it is true. So
that's wild.
It's pretty cool. You can you run a TLC not gel, but a TLC reaction, thin layer chromatography for my scientist heads out there. And you can then stain for certain chemicals, and in cocaine is one of the ones because it has a certain group on it. Anyways, I won't go too into the science, but that was a cool little tidbit. And again, Scott would know that because he's in the Secret Service. And do you know what?
Right.
Do you know what the Secret Service does when they're not protecting the president?
Well, no. The majority of what they do in terms of the manpower on their organization is currency, a counterfeit.
It's currency and counterfeiting. Yeah. Yep.
It's much more than the protective services they offer to the president. It's originally what they were founded for. Was the counterfeit. Yeah. Yeah, so all that's kind of cool. I was just so drawn out that by the time the cash thing was explained and, the bottle of water was the inoculation because all the Muslims were duped into thinking it was this holy water from Mecca, so they're protected. Could you really get protected from some big disease by drinking bottled water? Like, that's laced with something?
Well, if you put the antidote in it, yeah, you can.
That's like potent enough if you just drank some water with it?
I mean, for the story,
so sure. I didn't need 3 COVID shots. I could have just drank, some bottled water that had some COVID magic in it.
Well, we're not talking about. That's one of the things that Jillian says, right? Is that before vaccines, they had these antidotes that were either an anti-venom, and most of the time it was people that built up these immunities to these, and it was like their blood, their plasma. It essentially is a vaccine, but like you don't have to have people manufacturing an mRNA.
So let me just ask you, 1 through 10. I know jack shit about science. Every time there was a science lesson brought up, I was just like, this is kind of ridiculous. So 1 through 10. 1 is, this is absolutely hocus pocus, just bullshit that's not based in reality at all. Everything from the currency to the water bottle to the zombie disease to the rabies and the symptoms of it, to a 10, which is, I'm a scientist, PhD microbiologist from Cornell, amazing jobs and one of the smartest people I know. This is explained well. 1 through 10, like, where are you at? Like, how is this book handling the science? The Islamic science stuff, right? There's this strain of Islamic science that wants to use science, but also in a mystical way. 1 through 10, like, does this book hold up from a scientist perspective with all that?
It's probably like a 3-4.
Okay, yeah. That's where I thought it would be. It's mumbo jumbo, but maybe there's traces of something that's plausible in it.
Yeah, I mean, he got all like the idea behind having a multiplexing of diseases to make this master disease. I'm sure there is, like, was this the Zemiatsvi snake having this deadly snake poison? You got to figure out how you're gonna that's the one thing that they didn't really go into, is like how they're mass producing this, both the rabies virus as well as this snake venom. So
and obviously how they engineered it.
Yeah, how, like they didn't go into that at all. So maybe if they had that, a little bit more of that, then it would be a little bit higher buy-in. Yeah, like you said, how are they able to, the stability of the antidote in the water bottle? Like they keep these mRNA vaccines like at -80. Well, not the mRNA, but some of them they keep at -80. Some they have to keep at freezer level stuff. I don't know, but like when you think about anthrax, right? Anthrax is highly stable. It's a spore. It's a bug that is spored, and the spores have the actual anthrax poison in it. So like that is something that you can like grind into a powder and then put into a piece of mail, right?
Cash, yeah, or the cash thing, right? Like the cocaine and the cash,
right? So it's sort of combining like elements of how you would do a attack, and you just sort of made it all fit. Again, and I think even like Alcott's professor mentions that he studies this ancient DNA, right? And so it's really hard to, Hannibal's what, 2,000 years? Over 2,000 years?
Yeah.
So do you really think this unless they got their hands on a Zemiatsvi, like they did their research, they got like this from the box, what used to be the virus, this complex virus, and then they did science on. Oh, I guess that's what the scientists were for, right? They were taking this and trying to figure out, and then how to make it modern day.
You get the sense that was a long-term project, right? The scientists, like multiple scientists, working on this over multiple years.
Yeah, but it wasn't made clear. Like, were they working on the actual disease, like trying to figure out how to make it more modern day, or were they working on the antidote? So yeah, like again, with all the plausible deniability, yeah, it's like a 4 for me.
I was curious because a lot of the science mumbo jumbo is going over my head. I'm like, is this bogus or is this some sense of reality here? And I get that this is essentially historical science fiction, so it doesn't need to check out and work. You can still just enjoy the story, but it's got to have that sense of realism, which I couldn't deduce whether it had it or not, or if it was just completely bogus.
I was just glad that he didn't try to go into like more nitty gritty in terms of like describing what the scientists are actually doing, because I've read historical science fiction novels.
That's better than this.
No, that's worse than this, because
really?
they have that plot with the broad strokes. Like, so Brad has all the broad strokes, but then they try to go into the actual nitty gritty. And if you're an actual scientist and you get it wrong, you lose me, because you start like saying shit like, we're running PCR on our RNA, and we're able to amplify this, and
you're just throwing words
and
out.
Like, yeah, it's like you opened up your chemistry textbook and went to macromolecules and picked out words to throw into your novel. Yeah. Like, I'm glad he didn't go that route, because then it would have pissed me off.
I thought you were going to say the opposite, that there are some books that can do it well. So you're glad this one didn't try to, because it wouldn't have landed it.
I haven't really read a book that has tried to go that in depth.
Successful.
I've read a few, and that's what makes it, for me, takes it to the next level. Mm-hmm. But my guess is that most people don't want to know that next level. They just want the broad strokes.
Yeah, you're right.
So,
I think The Martian. I think The Martian did it.
Yeah, that's one where like he actually gets most science correct,
right?
And because this guy's parents actually were like a physicist, and
right.
One was a botanist, so he obviously knows the stuff, and he has at least resources he can connect with to say, all right, does this make sense? Is this real? Am I getting shit wrong? Type thing. So.
But that's rare to get that stuff.
I'll just say, Brad, if you ever need a scientific, consultant, I'm always here.
Yeah, there you go. The doctor, no limits doctor, the in-house doctor of the podcast. All right, dude. Well, to wrap this up, I thought it was kind of cool in the end where Scott lands the chopper in front of the motorcade, and they didn't get the radio communication yet, so they don't know that they're trying to be stopped for a good reason. So he just has to unload on the motorcade to make a point,
to stop
to slow them down.
Yeah. That was cool, actually.
He just parks that chopper like right in front of him. I could see that being something on screen, and he's just lighting them up just to get through to them. And finally, they get the communication saying, just stop. He's trying to convince you to not go near the plane because it's rigged. Because if the royal family blew, the Wahhabis and the extremists would have been able to take over Saudi Arabia. And basically the Scorpion and his plan would come to fruition. So they got stopped, and Harvath gets a little bit of a break. What'd you think about seeing Harvath on the beach?
I really like the epilogue. Like I like the fact that I'm guessing Gary Lawler is the one who's trying to get a hold of him, right? Even though he only gave Claudia Mueller his location. And he ends up telling with the bellhop that, he's going to have to wait 2 weeks. I'm taking some time off. So I really like that. You
think Gary's going to show up, or somebody's going to show up?
Well, he showed up, at the end of Path of Assassin, right? With him and Meg Cassidy to take him away to his next assignment. So it sort of one-ups that here and does the opposite.
Yep. Mental health. Scott's taking some time for himself on the beach. And Modelo's. I think he had a bucket of Modelo's.
I'll take a bucket of Modelo's right now.
I already had some Three Philosophers earlier, so I'm good. All right, we gotta wrap this up. So let's get into this scorecard, and part of the scorecard is going to be judging a cover by the book, which I'm happy to say I like a few of these. So maybe some good things there to bring me back on the positivity train. Let's start with action and plot. Tell me, what do you give Blowback?
All right. Initially, I gave it a 7 for action because there was some scenes that I really liked. We hit them all. The scene in the Alps, the scene in Paris, even the beginning scenes where we're getting the assassin working. I guess you can say that it's almost like thriller action with the scene in Asalam with the Navy people. Or not the Navy people, I guess the Marines or Army, whatever. Don't kill me if I'm getting that wrong. Yeah, the scene in Switzerland, the scene in Riyadh. I don't know. This thing, it had a decent amount of action, so I went with a 7.
All right. I went a little.
And I thought
lower.
I thought there were the better parts of the book. So I'm trying to elevate that here too. You could go 6. I feel like it's maybe a 6, but I'm elevating it to a 7.
Yeah, I went to a 6. I do think the action was the best parts of the book. That chopper scene we just mentioned at the end, a couple of the other battles in the middle, the fights at the castle. Yeah, a couple cool things going on there with the 6, so I'll give that to you. But the plot, I have to go to a 3 out of 10. It's messy.
Wow.
It's convoluted. There's a lot going on. Yeah, I just couldn't find myself to connect this one. I'd be curious to hear what you guys in listener land and audience land say. Probably the lowest score I'll ever give for plot. Just messy and all over the place. So 3 out of 10.
Yeah, I went with 5, 50%. Because it had me, unlike you, I enjoyed half of the novel, I guess. So I'm giving the plot a half. Again, it was so messy, too convoluted. Yeah, I don't want to beat it again, yeah. But everything we mentioned earlier.
Right.
And of course, so that's buy-in's going to suffer. So for this one, right. Buy-in's getting the lowest score. I can get a 1 because I don't believe anything in this. The plot's so fantastical that I can't buy anything.
Yeah. I'm a 1 out of 5 just because the plot didn't have me, but also I almost didn't have reason to keep reading this book. What was it, last night? You texted me about potting today. I was like, oh shit, I forgot. And then I forgot again today. But I think it was, I haven't done that with a book yet. Usually I want to rip through them. I want to talk about them. This one, I texted you a few times, like, I got to power through this. This is just, I got to just slog through it. I didn't think I'd finish. So yeah, for everything we said, 1 out of 5. Bad guys, good guys. What'd you think?
All right. So the bad guys, I give it 2. The elements were there for some of them. The assassin, Amir Tokai, Hosan Kalachka, the Scorpion, I guess, Carmichael, if you want to throw her in there as a bad guy. But again, like, I wanted Amir Tokai to be the big bad because he was like kind of cool. His backstory was cool. And I thought his expertise as this assassin was setting him up to be Scot's main foil. Not Amir
That's
Tokai,
Adamari.
sorry.
Not Amir Tokai.
Alamari. I'm mixing the two names up, sorry. But you know who I'm talking about.
Right.
But again, he gets killed halfway through the book, so I can't give him any higher than a 2. Good guys, on the other hand, I gave him 4. I liked, the cast of characters were good. I enjoyed Jillian. I love that Claudia was brought back in. We got our man Gary Lawler holding it down in DC. He gets Scott out of his predicament. We got the president's chief of staff. We get a couple good scenes with President Rutledge. Even though there was a lot of them, I liked some of the characters that Scott brings in, like the guy from the DEA, like his marathon running friend who is involved with satellites. Even that Aramco guy at the very end, he was a character. So the good guys were good. I gave it a 4.
All right. Yeah, a couple of the names you mentioned pushed me a little higher here. I was going to go with 1s. Would have been too harsh. Bad guys went up to a 2 because of Carmichael. I didn't like the Scorpion. I didn't like Alamari. They weren't doing it for me. So yeah, 2 out of 5. Big part of that couple points there is Carmichael. Then a 3 out of 5. You mentioned a lot of good names there, from Jillian to and bringing back Claudia, right? That's a full point or 2 here just for bringing back Claudia Mueller. And then, of course, the DEA guy. And I do think back to some of the jokes between he and Scott. And at one point,
the Walmart greeter.
The Walmart greeting. And then he's ripping on Scott like a bunch of times about his flat head or something, or a misshapen head. He's like, "Did your mom drop you as a baby? Did she use Crisco instead of baby oil?" And he's with the baby in his hands. He's like motioning and gesturing to Scott as a baby slipping out of his mom's hands. Like, he just didn't relent. So 3 out of 5. The good guys. All right. Okay. How about the setting? We already talked about traveling heavy here.
I mean, I got to go high on this because sheer volume, and some of the ones that we stay in longer, we do get the pretty good description of. I don't know. Scott, Brad's never going to get lower than a 4 for me on setting unless he does a complete stinker. So it's a 4.
Hey, all right. I'm glad you enjoyed the quantity because the quality for me was not like a usual Brad, although I will say when we were up in the mountains in the French Alps, the archaeology really cool. scenes, really kind of cool. I will say that. But I can't point, and maybe in England, when in the shopping mall, I can really imagine I was there, and then he pulls Jillian out to go to this pub. I went 3 out of 5. Setting was okay, but I don't think it's up to Brad's standards, and I think the quantity actually hurt it in this case. And I've said that before, that you pack too much in, it actually takes away from some of the quality. So 3 out of 5.
All right, what's your winner? What's your free space, baby?
Free space, I'm giving it to the humor. I brought it up a few times.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
It's a Thorism. It's a hallmark of Brad Thor and Scot Harvath. It sets him apart, and the humor landed here. Mostly the jokes with Nick Campos, the DEA agent, and then also the jokes about the underwear, the explosive underwear. So that worked for me. How about you?
For me, even though we got too much of historical fiction, I really did enjoy the Hannibal stuff. So even though I didn't love the whole virus thing, just learning about Hannibal and his crossing through the Alps and that different things, it made me want to go read more, and I did end up going to read more about that. As I was reading this, Wikipediaing, looking up articles. So for me, it's going to have to be just the idea of bringing in this Hannibal crossing the Alps, that story. Not so much the fact that he had the virus part of it, but more so the real historical fiction.
You would like
Hannibal did have this virus. Yeah, I need to check out. I mean, I love the Dan Brown shit because of that stuff. So
yeah, dude, Steve Berry's kind of similar to that. In a more streamlined way. He picks a historical event of the past, and that historical event has some sort of mystery, conspiracy connection to the modern world. Yeah, it's really cool. Really cool stuff. Yeah, I hear you there. I like the paleopathology part of Jillian.
Right.
I would have never considered that, and that's a pretty cool discipline to study. I kind of like that eclectic or somewhat esoteric academia that sometimes imagine being a professor of something that's so narrow in scope that it's just super fascinating. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, well, with my covers being a 3 out of 5, that brings me to, I think it's an all-time low on the podcast, 26 out of 50. That's not
we
really...
didn't even talk about the covers.
Yeah, I know. I figured we get there. I just wanted to say my really bad score to get it out of the way.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, I also gave the covers a 3, so that brings my score to a 31. Definitely the lowest of the Brad Thor novels. So lowest of any of the scorecards. So
yeah. Sorry, Brad. We love you. Your books are awesome. Just some things work for me, some things don't. Maybe I'm just in a salty mood for other reasons. Maybe because the school year's starting and I'm going back to work soon. But I'll leave it at that. I think I'm projecting a lot here today.
Yeah, I think you are. All right, let's wrap on a good note. Let's do our top 3 covers. And you go first, Mike, while I plug in my computer.
Dude, love a couple of these. I mean, using the biohazard symbol on covers B and C with the orange, the really deep, bright oranges. Super cool. I don't know why.
I love the orange.
Yeah, love the orange. The Eiffel Tower?
So they're in Paris for a hot second, but yeah.
There's not much Paris going on here. So I want to say C was my favorite. Didn't like the Eiffel Tower, so I'm going to knock that down to the 2 spot. And this is going to be kind of bizarre, but I think it's really cool. The tie cover, D.
Oh, D is really cool.
The knight's armor with that sword in the middle.
Like Hannibal type thing,
Yeah, dude, it's so different. And I think a tie cover has done this before. Something totally different that we haven't seen, and it works. I think it was actually it might have been American Assassin. I think the tie cover had the bench with the blood from Mitch's first kill.
No. Yeah.
So, I really like that one. That one's super cool. And then the flag's been done before. The star's been done before. So to make it a little different, I'm going with G, which I looked at and thought was the Russian cover. But no, that is Bulgarian, my friends. The Bulgarian cover has an operator, full kit, with his assault rifle pointed down, another weapon in the holster. For some reason, D and G are just doing something totally different I haven't seen before, and they work for me. So I'm going first D, second C, third G. And I know that is out there. Those picks are just wild picks, but I'm going with it.
All right, so I totally agree with you, and I'm really feeling the orange. So I love the one I own, which is B. I guess the orange, because we spent a lot of time over in the sand. I guess like that's where you're drawing from here. I like the new reprint, which is C, which you rated pretty high. But again, I don't know why they picked Paris. I guess it's the most recognizable landmark that we go to. I mean, you could have picked London. You could have picked Riyadh. You could have picked
the Alps.
The Alps. That would have been cool. That cover with like some
Alps.
Mountain. Yeah, some mountain in the Alps. I love the Crusader one in D. That one's really cool. I don't know, for some reason E is like, I don't know, it is a flag. If that had the biohazard symbol on it, that would be a little bit better. I don't know what the hell F is doing.
F is
really
weird.
Dark Capitol building. I don't know where the hell you're coming out here with G being one of your top ones.
I don't know, dude.
Sure.
I don't know where I got that from.
And then we got H, where, when does Brad look down the scope of a rifle? Or Scott look down the scope of a rifle? I don't know. All right, so my number one, or my third place is going to be D, with the Crusader, or I guess not Crusader, but with the Hannibal guy, which I'm calling the Hannibal armor guy. My second one is going to be C, the newer one with the Paris, and then my number one is going to be B, the Blowback, just the classic cover. Not the original, but the I think it's the mass market paperback. So the original mass market paperback.
Yeah. No, I understand. I was a little bizarre with my choices. I went a little out on a ledge, but I wanted to do something different. And D and G, they're doing something different today. So they're mixing it up for me.
All right. Well, we have one last thing to do. We got to give away a book. It's our Patreon giveaway. We forgot to give it away in the first episode, Mike.
Oh, dude, you're right. Yes, we owe our patrons. I'm not even going to read out the list of books, but I think we still have 8 or 10 different Brad Thor books signed by the man himself. So any one of those you're going to get to pick. We'll reach out to you as soon as I spin the Wheel of Names. All right, let's see which of our patrons will win a signed Brad Thor book this time. Julie S., the Evil Book Lady on Twitter. One of my favorite handle names, at Evil Book Lady. Congrats, Julie.
There you go. We'll reach out to you to get you your signed copy. And with that, we have to thank our patrons, including our special operator, Sherry F. Or what's her alias name on hold on, let me pull it up because it's pretty fucking hilarious.
On Insta?
No, on Gabrielle.
Oh, on our chat.
On our chat. All of a sudden, this Gabrielle starts chiming. Yeah, Gabriella Stevens. A special thanks to our special operator, Gabriella Stevens, a.k.a. Sherry.
Just a little background. We have a patron Group Me chat on the Group Me app, and we chat about thrillers, what each other's reading. And for the longest time, Gabriella Stevens was chatting us. I was like, do we say something that this is for patrons only? I don't know who this is.
But then when you click on that name, it says it's Sherry F. Like, it's so funny.
On her profile. Yeah, it's so weird. Anyway.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. And our special agents, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Congratulations, Mark, on your wedding. Saw some, still looking forward to the pictures. We saw one. Yes. You guys look beautiful. Congrats, Mark. Please subscribe, rate, and review using your favorite podcasting platform. Find us at thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Instagram at thrillerpodcast. And as always, don't stay in cheap hotels because they lack the proper ballroom.